Mom, Dad, I humbly suggest you save some money and shop Amazon for back to school. It's for my growth, meaning my body's growing at an alarming rate. And clothes you buy me this year will be very small very soon. Plus, the clothes I love today will be out of style tomorrow. But at least your wallet doesn't have to be my fashion victim if you shop low prices for school at Amazon. Hopefully this is helpful. Amazon. Spend less, smile more.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Dr. Psych Mom Show. Today, we're going to be talking about anxiety in men and how it manifests. And this is super important because it does not usually look like anxiety in the same way as it does with women. More women have anxiety than men, but that certainly does not mean that men don't struggle with anxiety as well. And we will get into what that looks like as soon as I tell you to subscribe. My most recent subscriber episode, let's see, was, should you choose a therapist who's the same gender as you? And I discuss why you may want to and why not. And of course, there's over 165 extra subscriber-only episodes. Okay, so anxiety in men. I recently did a post about this if you prefer to read, but if you preferred to read, you wouldn't be listening probably. So a lot of people do not understand that anxiety does not look always like somebody saying, I'm so worried. And they're not going to say they're worried if they're a guy because that sounds really vulnerable and it sounds kind of weak in their mind. Of course, it's not, but a lot of guys are trained not to show vulnerability. So instead of showing vulnerability, they try to get out ahead of whatever could bother them. So if they are worried about the way that things will go, they try to create routines that will get out ahead of the problem. So they'll get up at like 5 a.m. when they don't have to be at work till like 9. And they'll do all of their various things for the day. Maybe that's a workout, maybe it's not. But they have certain routines around preparation for work. They have routines around getting ready and what they have to do and in what order. And this rigidity, they usually think of it as like optimal or efficient. But the way that you could tell that it's rigidity is they're really not open to any feedback on how to change it, and they can't skip it. Like even for one day, even on vacation, it's pretty hard for them to skip their routine. So this rigidity can be very difficult for partners, and I'll get into more on that in a bit. And it is a hallmark of anxiety. And at an extreme, it can be OCPD, obsessive compulsive personality disorder. I have a whole podcast on that called OCPD, When You're Rigid as Fuck. Well, that's what that is. So you could listen to that too, but it can also be generalized anxiety disorder, which is the clinical name for what people call anxiety. All right. So moving on. Okay. So sleep problems and other body somatic symptoms are really, really big in anxiety. So when a guy's an insomniac and he either can't get to sleep or he wakes up in the middle of the night because he's thinking of all the things he has to do, then this is usually linked to anxiety. Healthy people that don't have anxiety do not ruminate all night about shit they have to do. They don't find it very hard to fall asleep. If you're somebody who always struggles with anxiety, then you do not know that most people go to sleep within a few minutes after laying down. That just seems like something from television because you grew up likely, anxiety, like everything, is genetic, it's nature and nurture. So if your parents were always wandering around in the middle of the night because they couldn't sleep, then you think that this is normal, but it isn't normal. Okay. And another thing that isn't normal is IBS, irritable bowel syndrome. This is big in guys with anxiety. They think they just have stomach issues, but they really have either constipation or diarrhea. And those are each different types of irritable bowel syndrome or IBS. And migraine, back pain, muscle tension, all of these somatic body symptoms are indicative of anxiety and also depression, by the way. And anxiety and depression are linked, and the same medications are used to treat both. Some people even think these are like just two sides of the same coin. So the same guys who say that they are in no way anxious and in no way depressed are very surprised to hear that the same meds are prescribed to treat their somatic symptoms, like their IBS or back pain or anything, pain in general, as is prescribed to treat anxiety and depression. This is often a wake-up call, like, wow, I guess these are similar. They must have some commonality or the same etiology if the same medications are used to treat both. And when I talk to guys and I'm like, is anxiety in your family? They say no. And I'm like, who had back pain? Who had migraine? Who had stomach problems? They're like, oh yeah, both of my parents or one of my parents was always in bed. His back would go out. Her stomach was terrible, this and that. And it's also, by the way, how it manifests in children. Anxious children have stomach aches a lot, although they don't usually have back pain, but they do have headaches and stomach aches. And sleep problems. Little anxious kids can't sleep either. So how do the guys end up going to sleep? Well, frequently it's from drinking. They drink or they use other substances, sleeping pills, drinking, or porn. You know, sometimes it's like an hour of porn or a half hour of porn every night, and that's the only way you can go to sleep. So this builds into the routine, and this substance allows you to finally stop thinking for a little window so that you can fall asleep. It's not normal to need a substance, whether it's porn, whether it's alcohol, whether it's a sleeping pill, to go to sleep. That is indicative of an issue, right? And a lot of people don't even realize this because they're so used to thinking, oh, you know, it's just my routine. And it's the routine that my dad had. He would just drink 3 beers before he had to go to sleep, you know, and I'm classier because I drink 2 glasses of wine before I go to sleep. No, you're not classier. It's the same thing. You know, it's just in a different form, glass, you know, it's in a glass instead of in a beer bottle. All right. What's another problem? A big problem is anger. Anger is really big. So if you get obstructed, if you feel like everything is hanging by a thread and it's so much stress and pressure to get through your day, and you're putting on your work persona to get through your work days so that, you know, you can avoid being anxious about potentially losing your job or messing up, because work fears are really big in guys. Then you get angry when somebody bothers you or obstructs you. So if you're trying to do something, if you're answering a work email and your heart is in your throat about how you're going to respond, and then your wife comes over and tries to give you a hug, you're not going to want to do that. You're going to stand there still as a stone. If your kid comes over to show you something, you're going to feel upset and obstructed and like, why doesn't anybody respect what I have to do? And this, why does nobody listen to me or why does nobody respect me, is a big thing for anxious guys. And they don't realize that they always need to be listened to and respected. And they always need to have things their way. So when kids approach them with, oh, I have an idea to do X or Y, they don't want to listen to that. If the kid says like, oh, you know, I think we should like plant a tree, all they hear is another thing on my plate, another fucking thing to worry about. When am I going to plant the tree? When are we going to go to plant the tree? What kind of bullshit is that? Do these kids even respect all the stuff that I have to do? Right? And so then how does the kid remember them? They remember them as an adult as the guy who said no way when you asked to do a little project, like one that you heard your friend did with his dad or something like that. Right? So a lot of guys first come in to get therapy when they finally realize that they are pushing away the people that they love with their rigidity. You know, or your wife says, let's take a trip this summer, and all your stomach clenches and all you hear is money, time. How do I get the time off work? How am I going to do my routines? And you don't explicitly say it, but inside you're thinking, how am I going to do my routines when I'm traveling? How will I do the various things I need to sleep? We're all going to be in one room. This is going to be terrible. On top of this, I'm going to have to make up the work that I miss. It all sounds so negative. It sounds like just, why would anybody do it? Travel is the worst. For guys who are really anxious, they don't travel. Most guys, by the way, will. Most guys have, this is how it's different. Guys have testosterone, as I always talk about, and testosterone gives you more confidence, more risk-taking, you know, like you'll do more stuff than an anxious woman. So most guys will travel. If you're very anxious, then you won't. So if it's at the extremes, then you won't travel, because it goes against the natural kind of male desire to explore and to have adventure and to have novelty. So you have to be pretty anxious for your anxiety to make sure that you will not even travel. And of course, that is how your wife and kids remember you, as then the Grinch and the stick in the mud that will not even go on a trip. You know, and things like that, again, can be the ones that finally spearhead the therapy initiative because the guy's like, wow, my wife feels like I'm a disappointment. Like, what's going on? And by the way, this guy's probably 1,000 times better than his own father or mother that he got the anxiety from, who like never traveled, never did anything, sat in the house, went right from work, right to home, and never did anything else, you know? So it's not like they didn't improve, but they're still nowhere near healthy, you know? And of course, all of this manifests in, as is obviously related to what I talk about all the time, relationship problems. So when you're acting in ways that if you saw somebody act like that on TV, you would not like that character, then you understand that you're grappling with some sort of mental illness that's making you act that way. So again, the example with the kid saying, let's plant a tree, or let's do this or that, or your wife saying, let's hang a shelf. If your wife saying, let's hang a shelf causes a physical reaction in your body, a fight or flight reaction, and it's not because your wife is some kind of lunatic that bashes you over the head with the shelf. It's because of the time, the effort, the prep. All of this, by the way, manifests in depression as well, but it doesn't feel like fear with depression. It just feels like overwhelm. It feels like I am never going to get the shelf straight. I do not have the energy for multiple iterations of the shelf. I don't honestly even have the energy to take the shelf out of the box. That's what depression looks like. Anxiety is fear that this is taking away time that you need to relax. This is a big one for anxious people. By the way, that's why anxious women get so crazy about the kids' nap schedules, because when the kid is awake, they are on and they need that time to relax because they're so tightly wound. So they look at the child's nap time and bedtime as this respite where they could finally relax. You may be like that if you're an anxious man too. I've only seen it mostly in women with the obsession on the nap schedule, particularly just because there's more stay-at-home moms, honestly. So the nap schedule, the guy isn't around for most of the time. But the bedtime is a big one, but not as much for men as for women. But what men think is, I will not have my time to relax by doing these other things like road trip, or like a little day trip rather, certainly not a road trip, travel, going to the pumpkin festival. Like, I need my weekend to fully relax or engage in my specific routines in the way that I have previously thought that they would go. I thought I would do this errand, then that errand, then I would relax, then I would do my workout, then I would do this, then I would do that. And if your wife is like, oh, why don't we drive to see, this event? Oh, look what's happening. There's this festival. There's this thing in the town square. Why don't we go to the farmer's market? You get angry. You think, why are you obstructing me and making my difficult life more difficult? And there's like a fear, fight, or flight reaction to the idea of a farmer's market. And that's when you got to really self-interrogate and say, why? Why is this happening? And when you go into therapy, you realize that you grew up usually in a very negative home where there was never anything new that was done. And if something new was done, it needed a million different preparation hours, and it was incredibly taxing. And the overall precept of everything was, it will be difficult to do a new thing, so let us never do a new thing as much as possible. So packing for a trip was fraught. Getting ready for school was fraught. What if we forget something? What if we don't have everything? What if we don't know everything? And the idea of people just like going on random trips or like, just going out to dinner just for the hell of it after you've not planned to is very crazy to anxious people. But if you don't do things like that, then your children end up thinking that your home and that adulthood in general is just this, unhappy, like not March of the Penguins. What's the other one? The Volga Boat March. It's just march into death. Everything is the same all the time because we're terrified if it changes. And that's not who you want to be. And remember back to being a kid, you didn't like that kind of house. You didn't like whichever parent, possibly both, acted like that. So that can be a lot of motivation to seek your own therapy. Therapy is very transformative for anxiety. Exposure is transformative. So sitting with the anxiety, testing out other ways of behaving, getting outside of those prescribed, rigid, tracks that underlie all of the things that you do, and venturing out and seeing that nobody dies, everything's okay, your family's happier, and that your nervous system will calm down. You won't be in a constant state of panic at the farmer's market, And of course, for some people, therapy is not adequate and medication can help as well. But guess what? It shouldn't be a surprise, but anxious people get extremely anxious about medication. They say things like, but then I'll be on it forever. I'll be hooked. I'll be on it, for the rest of my life, and I won't be able to get off of it. Meanwhile, like if it helped, great, that's great that you would be on it. But, they don't see that part. They're like, then I'll be a drug addict, And so obviously therapy can be very helpful in interrogating a lot of these assumptions, most, if not all of which you grew up with. And you may not realize that until I'm saying it right now. But anxiety and this feeling of walking on eggshells around an anxious parent is really difficult for kids and almost ensures that they will get their own anxiety disorder, as you did from your own parents. And I talk about this all the time because I grew up in an anxious house, and it was very difficult for me to get rid of the anxiety, and it's a large part of why I went into this field, because I realized how difficult it was and to get over these things and how important it is. When you're an anxious kid growing up in an anxious house, that's the water. You're like a fish in water. And then when you get out of it, you're like, oh my God, life doesn't have to be so difficult. It doesn't have to be so difficult to leave the house. We don't need to look at a million different things on the, to check the locks and to do all these things before even going outside, It can be different. It can be like the people on TV that just fucking walk out the house, or just go on a trip, or just go out to dinner, or just, do something after work, versus having to come home and do the exact same routine every day after work, et cetera, et cetera. If this spoke to you, reach out for therapy. You can reach out to me, my people at Best Life Behavioral Health, or anybody else, to help you. Because truly, your children do not deserve to grow up with an anxious parent. Your wife may not stay. I mean, that's the point too, is like eventually your wife may get sick of walking on eggshells. And not to say she's a perfect person, but if you struggle with this, then do your part to change it. And that is your pep talk. And I hope that it was useful for at least one man suffering from anxiety, had an epiphany, hopefully. And I will talk to y'all soon. Have a great day, guys.